Thank you to the cable and satellite companies who provide C-SPAN to viewers as a public service.
Was arrested.
Bully the district attorney. It is particularly disgraceful that they would use this pretext after
Previously was a member of the Community Board 5 Queens for 30 years, served as first chair for 7 years, and served as chairman of the board's Public Safety Committee for 13 years.
that the chairman
Come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. The chair will now recognize the gentlelady from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair would ask the press to maybe clear out of the middle here so we can see our witnesses and proceed with the hearing. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on victims of violent crime in Manhattan. We are joined today by some of our colleagues who would like to participate in the hearing. Ms. Stefanik, Mr. Goldman, whose district we're in, and Mr. Espaillat. Per an agreement with Mr. Nadler and without objection, these members will be permitted to participate in today's hearing for only the purpose of asking questions of the witnesses. Each side will have an additional 5 minutes for these members to question the witnesses. The chair now recognizes himself for an opening
Mr.
statement.
Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent. I understand Mr. Alba may be utilizing the services of an interpreter today, and so that the interpretation time would occur off the clock so that we might be able to ask questions of Mr. Alba.
Without objection, so ordered. While we're speaking of time, I know we have to be back in the Capitol tonight for some votes, so the chair will probably be pretty darn strict with the 5-minute rule, but we want to make sure all our witnesses get their full 5 minutes and members get their time to question. Today's hearing is about the administration of justice and keeping communities safe, something that has always been a central focus of the House Judiciary Committee. Our witnesses today have felt the effects of crime up close and personal. They've been victimized by a justice system that cares more about political correctness than punishing the criminals who've harmed them and harmed their family. We thank them for being here and sharing their story. Their stories are emblematic of a city that's lost its way when it comes to fighting a crime and upholding the law. As we all know, fairness under the law is a bedrock principle of American democracy. In this country, justice is supposed to be blind, regardless of race, religion, or creed. However, here in Manhattan, the scales of justice are weighed down by politics. For the district attorney, justice isn't blind. It's about looking for opportunities to advance a political agenda, a radical political agenda. Rather than enforcing the law, the DA is using his office to do the bidding of left-wing campaign funders. He's taken a soft-on-crime approach to the real criminals. One of Mr. Bragg's first actions upon taking office in January of 2022 was to put out a memo that directed his assistant district attorneys not to prosecute certain crimes, including trespassing and resisting arrest. The memo also stated that armed robberies should not be prosecuted as felonies. Instead, they were to be considered as misdemeanor larceny unless someone was shot during the course of the robbery. Thank goodness, after a backlash from police groups and the public, Mr. Bragg agreed to prosecute some robberies as felonies, but left the rest of the memo in place. The president of NYPD Detectives Endowment Association said, quote, "Bragg gives criminals the roadmap to freedom from prosecution and control of our streets. In Bragg's Manhattan, you can resist arrest, deal drugs, obstruct arrest, and even carry a gun to get away with it. And guess what happened under this new policy? More crime. In 2022, Mr. Bragg's first year as district attorney, New York City saw a 23% surge in major crimes. Felony assaults rose 13%, robberies spiked 26%, burglaries in New York City went up 23%, grand larcenies were up 26%, and auto theft increased 32%. Transit crime surged nearly 30%. Imagine that. You leave criminals on the street, you get more crime. Patrick Lynch, the president of the Police Benevolent Association, said, police officers don't want to be sent out to enforce laws that the district attorneys won't prosecute. There are already too many people who believe that they can commit crimes, resist arrest, interfere with police officers, and face zero consequences. We should take a minute here to thank our brave men and women in law enforcement. We got a number of them right here in this building. Thank you for what you do. In the last few years, police have been villainized and harassed by the left and even defunded. These men and women put their lives on the line every day, every single day, and they deserve our deepest gratitude. But that's not what they're getting from left-wing district attorneys here and around the country. Police do their job. They do the hard work. They go out on the streets. They catch the bad guys. And then the DAs don't do theirs, don't do their job. Instead, they let bad guys roam the street. As we'll hear today, repeat offenders are plaguing New York City. On April 6, 2023, NYPD Commissioner Sewell said, recidivism is the undertow pulling against everything we are doing to keep our city safe. It is counterproductive to public safety and, frankly, is a perpetual carousel of police resources. Astonishingly, Sewell said that 327 individuals were arrested more than 6,000 times for retail theft. Think about that. 327 individuals responsible for 6,000 retail thefts, what we used to call stealing, taking someone else's property. Each person arrested on average 20 times. Maybe we wouldn't have had that problem if they'd arrested them and kept them in jail after the first, the second, or maybe even the 19th time. Average of 20 times. Given the record of crime, the record level of crime we are seeing around the country, our plan this Congress has been to include field hearings in some of our greatest cities to analyze and highlight how soft on crime policies hurt families, hurt communities, hurt small business owners. We believe it's important to hear from victims and their families who simply want to share their stories, hoping that it will help create change so other families don't have to suffer like they did. What better place to start than New York City, where videos of violent, senseless attacks appear almost daily, and where the DA of Lower Manhattan earned a reputation for caring more about the perpetrators of crime than the victims. Thanks again to all our brave witnesses for being here. And thanks to the NYPD, the Capitol Police, and the Federal Protective Services for all they do to keep people safe. And now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Nadler, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me be very clear. We are here today in Lower Manhattan for one reason and one reason only. The chairman is doing the bidding of Donald Trump. Committee Republicans designed this hearing to intimidate and deter the duly elected district attorney of Manhattan from doing the work his constituents elected him to do. They have demanded access to the inner workings of an ongoing criminal case, information to which they know they are not entitled. They have subpoenaed a witness who used to work for the district attorney, whom they know cannot answer their questions. And they have earned a lawsuit that risks future congressional oversight as a result. They have perpetuated the anti-Semitic and racist tropes that Mr. Trump has directed at both the prosecutor and the judge in this case. They are using their public offices and the resources of this committee to protect their political patron, Donald Trump. It is an outrageous abuse of power. It is, to use the chairman's favorite term, a weaponization of the House Judiciary Committee. I do not know if Mr. Trump will be found guilty.
Gentlemen, suspend. The gallery should refrain from commenting and let the gentleman from New York finish his statement. Gentleman is recognized.
I do not know if Mr. Trump will be found guilty by a jury of his peers here in New York, or for that matter in Georgia or in Washington, D.C. on charges that may follow, but I do know that he will have his day in court. Using this committee to undermine that process as it unfolds is cynical, unethical, and given the violence unleashed on the Capitol by the former president, just plain dangerous. Now, we all grieve for the victims of violent crime here in Manhattan and everywhere, but it is shameful that the Republicans of this committee would use the pretext of violent crime as an excuse to play tourist in New York and bully the district attorney. And it is particularly disgraceful that they would use this pretext after doing nothing to stop the gun violence that terrorizes our nation. According to the Gun Violence Archive, there have been at least 146 mass shootings this year alone. That means there have been more mass shootings than days so far this year. 3 people were shot dead and 5 others injured at Michigan State University. 3 children and 3 teachers were shot and killed at a private school in Nashville, Tennessee. 5 people are dead and 8 others, including 2 police officers, are injured after a mass shooting at a bank in Louisville, Kentucky. These tragedies have taken place in nearly every corner of our nation, although I note in the study by Everytown that in states where elected officials have taken action to pass gun safety laws, dramatically fewer people die by gun violence. And although there has not, thank God, been a recent mass shooting here in Manhattan, we must do more to stem the iron pipeline, the illicit flow of illegal firearms from states that do less to protect their citizens to New York and elsewhere. Unlike our Republican colleagues, Democrats have consistently advanced policies that make all of our communities, including New York, safer places to live, to work, to worship, and to go to school. Last Congress, over the objection of every Republican here today, we passed the first gun violence prevention package in decades. We can and must do more. We must pass universal background checks. We must implement red flag laws to keep guns away from those who are a danger to themselves and others. And we must reinstate the assault weapons ban. Each of these proposals are overwhelmingly popular with the American public, and each is opposed by House Republicans. We also advanced the Victim Act to provide funding to law enforcement to improve murder clearance rates. If my Republican colleagues were serious about violent crime and sincere in their efforts for law enforcement, they would have joined us in that effort. But 178 Republicans opposed that measure last Congress on the House floor. We supported legislation to improve policing through additional funding, better training, and accountability to strengthen public trust, because we know that public safety requires law enforcement agencies and their community partners working together. Again, every Republican on the committee stood opposed. Here in New York, one of the largest and most complex cities in the world, local leaders have pursued violence intervention, diversion programs, targeted law enforcement, and youth engagement programs that have pushed crime and incarceration to the lowest levels in decades. Over the past year, under the leadership of Mayor Adams and District Attorney Bragg, crime in Manhattan has dropped in nearly every major category, including murders down 14%, shootings down 17%, burglaries down 21%, and robberies down 8%, all in 1 year. And compare that to Mr. Jordan's Ohio, where the homicide rate is 73% higher than in Manhattan. And on the specific topic of gun violence, the district attorney is to be commended for securing indictments against gun traffickers, ghost gun manufacturers, and other violent criminals, leading to a full 20% reduction in shootings last year. The chairman says this hearing is about violent crime in Manhattan, but New York remains one of the safest big cities in America. I'm sure my colleagues have talking points and anecdotes to the contrary, but the evidence is firmly on our side. And the evidence shows, unfortunately, that the chairman could have held his hearing back in Washington or in Ohio or in any other jurisdiction where the numbers are trending in the wrong direction. But instead, he rushed to hold a hearing here in Manhattan in defense of Donald Trump. I understand that in the days leading up to this hearing, Republican members were instructed not to speak about Mr. Trump during these proceedings. Don't take the bait, they were warned, as if we cannot draw a straight line from the chairman's attacks on the district attorney in the wake of the indictment to his attacks on the district attorney here today. We know better. We all know better. The New Yorkers gathered outside of this building certainly know better. You can pretend that you aren't here on Donald Trump's behalf, but you cannot stop the New York criminal justice system from running its course, and you will not intimidate New Yorkers with your brief visit to this city. I thank the chairman, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for his statement. And now, without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witnesses. Mr. Jose Alba. Mr. Alba was forced to defend himself while working at a bodega. He was attacked by a repeat criminal who was on parole for assaulting a police officer. During the attack, Mr. Alba was stabbed and defended himself with a knife. Despite surveillance video showing that he acted in self-defense, Alba was arrested and charged with murder. These charges were later dropped after public outrage, including from Mayor Adams and former NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton. Thank you, Mr. Alba, for being here. Ms. Jennifer Harrison. Ms. Harrison is the founder of Victims' Rights New York, an organization that advocates on behalf of victims and survivors of homicide victims. Ms. Harrison's boyfriend was killed in 2005. We've heard you talk about this, Ms. Harrison. We appreciate you being here. Two of the assailants were allowed to walk free, while the third spent only a few years in jail. Mr. Jim Kessler. Mr. Kessler is the Executive Vice President for Policy and co-founder of the Third Way. He previously served as Legislative and Policy Director to Senator Schumer. Ms. Madeline Brame. Ms. Brame is the New York State Chairwoman of the Victims' Rights Reform Council. The Victims' Rights Reform Council was formed to provide a voice and advocate for victims of crime. Ms. Brame's son, Sergeant Hanson Correa, was murdered in 2018 by 4 assailants. Sergeant Correa's father was also stabbed during the attack. Ms. Brame, we're sorry for your loss. Thank you as well for being here. The Honorable Robert F. Holden. Councilman Holden represents District 30 on the New York City Council. He co-leads the Common Sense Caucus with Councilman Joe Borelli. He previously was a member of the Community Board 5 Queens for 30 years, served as first chair for 7 years, and served as chairman of the board's Public Safety Committee for 13 years. Mr. Holden, thank you for being here and for your public service. Ms. Rebecca Fisher. Ms. Fisher is the executive director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. Her organization seeks to inform the public, particularly youth, about the dangers of gun violence and ways to prevent and reduce gun violence. Mr. Paul DiGiacomo is the president of New York Police Detectives Endowment Association. The association represents 20,000 active and retired New York City detectives. Mr. DiGiacomo served with the NYPD for 40 years. Thank you. And Mr. Barry Borgen. Mr. Borgen's son was a victim of a violent crime who was targeted because of his faith, his Jewish faith. While walking near a pro-Israel rally, Mr. Borgen's son was attacked and beaten by at least 4 men. They said all kinds of terrible things, sprayed mace in his face. Mr. Borgen, we're sorry for that. What happened to your son? Thank you for being here today. We welcome our witnesses. Thank them for appearing today. You each be given 5 minutes. The clock there, when it gets to the yellow, that means it's kind of close. And like I said before, we'll try to be pretty strict on the time. But again, thank you all for being here. Mr. Alba, you're up first. Oh, we got to swear you in. I forgot about that. We got to do that. Would you all please stand and raise your right hand? Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. Please know that your written testimony will enter into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize, as I said before, your testimony in 5 minutes. Mr. Alba, you may begin. Thank you. Can you pull that mic real close there, sir? Pull that. There we go. It's on, I think. Just pull it down right in front.
Okay.
Is there a green light?
Now it is. Yeah.
Good.
So again, Imran H. Ansari on behalf of my client, Mr. Alba. I deliver his opening statement. First, I want to make this clear. My testimony is not motivated by a political agenda. I am not here to support or side with any particular political party. I am not here because I'm supporting Republicans. I am not here because I want to criticize the Democrats. I just want to tell the public about the horrible experience I had to go through because of crime in this city. An experience that has changed my life and that I will never forget. On July 1st, 2022, I went to work at the bodega, just like any other day. I took pride in the hard work I put in every day at the store to earn my own money and support myself and my family. That is when I encountered a true and real threat to my life. After I simply told a woman that she could not have potato chips because her payment was declined. I was face to face with her boyfriend, who seemed ready to kill me. He attacked me violently, threw me around the store. The woman stabbed me herself. I truly believed they were there to kill me. So faced with this, I did what I knew I had to do to save my life. What the law allows me to do to save my life. I stabbed that man in self-defense. But when the police came, even though I was injured myself, I was placed under arrest. I was taken to jail. When I came before the judge, the prosecutor said I was being charged with murder in the second degree. They asked for bail, even though so many people are being let go these days, and I couldn't afford it. So I went to Rikers Island. I was forced into a crowded and unsafe intake cell. Even though I was injured, in jail I didn't get the medical treatment I should have received. I spent almost a week in Rikers Island before bail was lowered and I could be released. I was forced to endure the harsh conditions on Rikers Island as an innocent man. I still don't know why I was charged with murder. I believe that law enforcement and the DA's office didn't investigate the case fully. They rushed to judgment, and I suffered because of it. Even though the charges were ultimately dropped, they should not have been brought against me to begin with. I am now traumatized from the incident. I am not working because I am terrified for my life that someone in a gang will come after me for revenge. I was injured physically and mentally because of the incident and my unlawful arrest and incarceration. My story is one that should not happen again. Crime does not discriminate on the basis of a political party. It needs to be addressed by law enforcement on the street and by prosecutors in the court. But it has to be aimed at the people committing crime, not an innocent man like me. And the next time an innocent man does nothing but protect their own life in self-defense from a violent attack, they should not be made the villain, but instead treated with care and compassion as the victim.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alba. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ms. Harrison, you're recognized for your 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jennifer Harrison. I'm the founder of Victims' Rights New York. Sadly, I was thrown into this world and forced to become an expert on the issues we are here to discuss when on January 15th of 2005, both my boyfriend and his best friend were murdered. 3 brothers were arrested and charged, but justice was not served, as 2 of these brothers, both who had records, were freed in a sweetheart deal. Ultimately, only 1 person served just 9.5 years for killing 2 people. Through that horrible experience, I connected with support groups on both the national and local level. I became an advocate against some of the atrocities I witnessed and tried to help other survivors of homicide victims connect with the resources they need to navigate through this endless nightmare. I have been doing so for over 18 years. I became more politically involved and got louder in 2017 when I learned of bail reform and other dangerous and deadly so-called social justice reforms. Nobody wanted to listen to us, though. The victims that have to live with the consequences of these decisions for the rest of our lives, when we warned of the harm that this would cause. Victims have no voice in politics or government, so I want to thank this committee from the very bottom of my heart for giving victims that voice today. There is a depraved indifference towards human life sweeping across our country, even amongst elected officials. Normally, the criminals exude this depravity, yet here we have the one that is supposed to prosecute them as the one showing it. I would also like to say that if Alvin Bragg was doing his job, none of us would be here today to talk. We are not politicizing our issues or our loss. From day one, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg announced he would not prosecute even very violent crimes in his now infamous memo. We saw an immediate result. 2 police officers were shot and killed, a 19-year-old girl was murdered while working at Burger King, and multiple police officers were shot in separate incidents. Things have not gotten better, only progressively worse. Bragg's office has downgraded 52% of felonies, and even when his office does decide to prosecute a case, they only have about a 50% conviction rate. No one is safer, as he promised, as a result of his delusion or diversions. During Bragg's first year in office in 2002, the crime index went up 25.57% borough-wide, violent crime up 11.73%, and in Manhattan South, one precinct alone, murders were up 40%. You will hear many horrible stories today. We read about them almost daily, like Madeline Brame and Jose Alba, whose testimonies will speak for themselves. I am here today on behalf of the many other victims that reach out to me and are afraid to speak out, who are completely distraught with the way they have been or are being treated by the career public defenders in Bragg's office. They are being told the office does not have the resources to prosecute their case. We have heard nothing about murdered victims Crystal Baron-Nieves, Michelle Go, Christina Lee, or how their cases are being handled. Christina Lee was brutally murdered by a mentally ill homeless man who was supposed to be under supervised release in a shelter run by a nonprofit. Who was supervising this emotionally disturbed man? How did this happen? The Manhattan DA's office has the authority and the duty to investigate and indict or make recommendations in situations like this that will keep New Yorkers safe and prevent it from happening again. Yet none of that has been done. Does Bragg's office not have the resources for this either? I have heard from victims of domestic violence and hate crimes that have not been charged, who are also unable to get the support services they are not only entitled to, but that the Manhattan DA's office receives federal and state funding to provide. Why are they not providing these services efficiently? Over 65 assistant district attorneys left the office in the first half of 2022. Most were experienced veteran prosecutors that cannot be replaced. Only a select few are left in that office to fight for victims. What resources is Alvin Bragg using to replace those that left instead of using their exit as a scapegoat for not prosecuting cases? It is a very scary time to be here. God forbid you or your family are victimized. Who do you have to fight for you? No one. Alvin Bragg has given excuse after excuse to not prosecute violent crimes, forsaking not only the distraught and forever changed victims, but the entire justice system. And we have no recourse when our rights are violated. We cannot file for prosecutorial misconduct. Only the criminals can, even when they violate our fundamental rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Alvin Bragg's dereliction of duty and malfeasance has caused tremendous harm. In our newfound progressive society, all of the compassion and empathy is placed with those intentionally inflicting harm on others and not with the innocent casualty, the victim. So again, I thank you for giving victims a voice today and for allowing us to shed some light on what is happening here in hopes that it will change everywhere.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Ms. Brame, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Madeline Brame. I am the chairwoman of Victims' Rights Reform Council. I'm also the mother of a homicide victim. My son, Sergeant Hassan Korea, Afghanistan War retired veteran, was killed in Harlem in 2018. Hassan was kicked, punched, stomped, and stabbed 9 times by 4 individuals he did not know, nor had he done them any harm. All 4 of these individuals were apprehended, and all 4 charged with first-degree gang assault and second-degree murder. This case just resolved this year. So this case drug on through the Manhattan criminal court system for 4.5 years. When Alvin Bragg came into office, he was handed a strong, trial-ready murder case and gang assault case against all 4 of these individuals, where this brutal, savage homicide was captured on video. He was handed a strong, trial-ready case, ready to go to trial. As soon as he took office, the case immediately began to unravel. He dismissed, completely dismissed, gang assault and murder indictments against 2 of the defendants clearly on video participating in the brutal, savage slaughter of my son. Mary Saunders, the sister involved in the homicide. He dismissed her indictment and recharged her with assault with a shoe and sentenced her to 1 year time served. Travis Stewart dismissed his gang assault and murder indictment and sentenced him to attempted gang assault. And he pled guilty and sentenced him to 7 years. Travis will be out in the next 18 months. Mary Saunders, this savage, is currently walking the streets of Harlem like she didn't just participate in the brutal slaughter of another human being. Home with her family, home with her children. If that's not a threat to public safety, I don't know what is. She's capable at any moment of snapping and attacking someone and holding them while someone else plunges a butcher knife into their body 9 times, and another person 12 times, and then run away and leave their body in the street to bleed to death. This is the type of criminal element that we have walking the streets of New York City on a daily basis. All types of criminal elements, free to do what they want, when they want, however they want, to whomever they want, with no consequences, no deterrence. We have these anti-gang violence, these credible messenger. Millions and billions of our hard-earned tax dollars are going to fund these organizations that are doing absolutely nothing to deter this crime. They're doing absolutely nothing. And I propose not another dime of our federal tax dollars be pumped into these organizations until they can produce some measurable outcomes of effectiveness of what they're doing with our tax dollars to protect the public.
Audience, there is no audience participation. Ms. Brame, you keep going.
And as far as the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, if he's receiving 1 penny of federal dollars, you need to pull that funding until he starts doing his damn job and prosecuting crime. I was totally disrespected. Me, my family, my grandchildren, we were treated like garbage. Like garbage. I've sat for 4.5 years and saw mothers walk in and out. We have a mother sitting here right now whose son, 2 sons, one died and the other one is on a coloscopy bag. This is out of Darcel Clark's jurisdiction. So I'm not the only one. There are hundreds and thousands of us. We don't give a damn about